Welcome to In Focus SoCal. I'm Tanya McRae. More than 400,000 children are in foster care in the U.S. About 50,000 of those children are here in California, with almost 1/3 in Los Angeles County alone. The foster care system is overseen by the state and implemented by county child welfare agencies. One Los Angeles Assemblyman has been a powerful advocate of the child welfare system, looking to implement several reforms. I'll sit down with Assemblyman Isaac Bryan in just a few minutes. But first, I want you to meet one couple who became adoptive parents and have been fighting to receive survivors' benefits on behalf of their children. Just one of the changes Assemblyman Bryan is working to make.
Now if you could just go yes, yes, every time I ask you to do something.
The tag worker family is celebrating the last day of school and the beginning of summer vacation. But the joy and laughter they're sharing comes after a very unexpected and at times turbulent 8-year journey. Amy and her husband Mike had decided they wanted to adopt one child under the age of 5. They took a year of classes to get a license to adopt through the San Diego Child Welfare Services. Then in 2015, they received a call that there were 2 sisters, Victoria and Bella, who were 4 and 6, that needed to go into emergency foster care immediately.
When they called and they shared a little bit of the situation with the girls, and they said their names and their ages and that they needed to place the kids right away because they could no longer stay where they were in a group home. I come from a really big family and it just pulled on my heartstrings. So right away I just knew that we were being called to do this.
4 days later, Amy and Mike brought the girls home, got them settled in, and quickly adapted to a whole new way of life.
I got the crash course on how to deal with really curly, thick hair. My wife said, this is what you need to do. And I'm like, all right. And so I got really good with gel and hair ties and scrunchies.
You are my sunshine, my only sunshine.
Victoria and Bella spent 18 months with the couple, and during that time, the girls flourished.
It was nice to have like a parent figure that would help me do my homework and like actually get to go to school and like have friends at my school, and like we would have dress up days at school, and so I would twin with my friends, which I have never done before. And then we got to do crazy hair days and stuff like that.
Was Mike a part of those crazy hair days?
Oh yes, he was. Definitely.
Happy birthday to you.
Amy and Mike knew that this was a temporary situation until the girls could be safely reunified with their biological parents. And in March 2017, Bella and Victoria were sent back to them. But the connection and the love Amy and Mike had developed for the girls ran very deep.
Seeing them leave was heartbreaking, very heartbreaking, and probably one of the most difficult things I would say that I did.
It's emotional for you just thinking back to those times.
Yeah. But we knew at that time that it was the absolute best thing for their family, and we were very fortunate to stay in touch with the family off and on for the 4 years that they were with their biological parents.
In 2020, Victoria and Bella's father passed away, and in 2021, Bella ran away from her mother and called Amy from the streets.
I always felt safe with Amy, and I had a phone, so I knew she would be the first one I would call, and I was just like sitting on the curb waiting for her.
The police got involved, and this became a case of neglect by the mother. Child Protective Services placed the girls back with Amy and Mike. But the girls had gone through a great deal of trauma in the 4 years they had been gone, so being back with Amy and Mike was a much bigger adjustment this time around.
When we first came back, it was hard adjusting, because I didn't really know how to trust anyone. They were trying to build me up again and trying to help me find who I was.
They're being parents, which you hadn't really experienced very much before. The family eventually found their footing again, but then a new issue surfaced. When Bella and Victoria's father passed away, they were entitled to receive survivor benefits. But instead of that money going to the girls, the County of San Diego collected nearly $25,000 of their benefits and deposited the money into municipal accounts. Amy had her suspicions about where the money was going and sought answers from Children's Advocacy Institute.
This was not only illegal, it was immoral.
When you take someone's property without notifying them or giving them a chance to participate, it's a violation of their due process rights. When you charge one group of kids, such as orphans or disabled kids, for their care, but you pay for everybody else's foster care, that's discrimination. And when you use money that's intended for a child for your own benefit, instead of in the best interest of the child, you're violating your fiduciary obligations, as well as your ethical duties to act in the best interest of that vulnerable child.
In February of this year, State Assemblymember Isaac Bryan introduced Assembly Bill 1512. The Institute is a co-sponsor.
What 1512 does is to stop the practice of taking kids' money while memorializing the state's obligation to apply for those benefits. The money is supposed to be spent to provide for things the agency is not already responsible for paying for, which does not include their foster care itself. Federal and state law explicitly require the agency to pay for foster care for all children.
Amy has testified in support of AB 1512, and the girls are finally receiving their survivor benefits. But a lawsuit has been filed on their behalf against the County of San Diego, Health and Human Services Agency, Child Welfare Services, to try and recoup the $25,000 in benefits that the county took.
These are funds that could go into a college fund for them, their first apartment, a car.
Right.
And there are kids out there that have aged out of the system that didn't even know that they were entitled to funds to help them. So it's not just about us. It's about how do we make a change? How do we help affect change so that this doesn't affect other kids down the line that are going through the same thing.
On November 4th, 2022, Mike and Amy signed adoption papers for Victoria and Bella. You both have become activists on a few different levels here in terms of supporting foster children, supporting these two girls, and now supporting legislation. Did you think all of this would ever be a part of your story?
No, absolutely not. It's very interesting how it's all happened. I'm excited to do it though, because not only has it impacted our own children, but I don't want any child who has had an experience with Child Protective Services to have those monies taken from them. So I am honored to be the voice for these kids that have had a really hard start to life.
In Focus SoCal reached out to San Diego County for comment on the lawsuit. We have not heard back. After the break, I sit down with Assemblyman Isaac Bryan on the reforms he wants to implement to improve California's foster care system. You're watching In Focus SoCal. We'll be right back. Los Angeles Assemblyman Isaac Bryan is on a mission to reform the child welfare system in California. I recently sat down with him to discuss the bills that he's hoping to get signed into law this year. Here's our conversation. Assemblyman Bryan, thank you so much for coming to our studio today. It's so great to meet you in person finally.
Well, it's really good to be here. Thank you for having me.
So you've become a leading author of bills to improve child welfare services here in California, and there's a few bills that passed the Assembly earlier this month. Let's start with AB 1324, which is aimed to eliminate foster care debt for parents whose children were previously in care. Talk about this bill and the expanding issues surrounding it.
Yeah, so we had an archaic practice in place since the 80s, where we were charging struggling families who lost custody of their children for their children's time in foster care. Essentially, you were paying child support to the county for having had your children. The problem is you didn't lose your children because you had a strong economic footing in most instances. We also found that for every dollar we spent as a county trying to collect that money, we only would collect 27 cents back. So it was cost ineffective to the taxpayer, and it hurt struggling families. So last year we passed a bill to prevent counties across California from going after that debt going forward, assessing new debt. In fact, it was so impactful that the federal government changed the rules for every county across the country. What was left on the table, though, was the outstanding debt for families that had been set this debt prior to our bill passing last year. So what this bill would do is clear or discharge that remaining debt It's one of those exciting times where we're not just moving progress on a problem, we are actually going to solve the problem here in California.
Actually solving a problem. Now there's a concept. So how much debt are we talking about?
It ranges between 17 to 50 million statewide that has been set on families currently who are unable to pay it.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah, and it's not all the original debt too. When you can't pay the debt, you're hit with a 10% penalty fee. And so that's what's racked up these numbers. But again, it's also not real debt because these are families who are not able to pay this. We have no expectation of collecting this money. So all that we're doing is preventing these families from building the economic footing that they need and that they deserve.
Let's talk about AB 954. How does this legislation help families who go through the foster care system?
Yeah, so right now, the literature, all of the evidence shows us that the best thing for a child, if at all possible, is to reunify a family, to keep families whole. And we have families that are actively going through their reunification case plan, but they are being denied reunification because they couldn't pay for a portion of their case plan. And I think that that's wrong. If the only reason you don't have custody of your child is because you couldn't afford to pay for a part of your plan, we shouldn't keep you separated. And so what this will do is we'll empower the courts to look more carefully at the poverty that struggling families have and find alternative ways to make sure that they can get all the help and support that they need and that poverty is not the barrier from keeping families together.
California child welfare agencies have been under fire for pocketing foster children's Social Security money. How is this money being used?
Right now, it is just going into the black hole of county budgeting. It's being used to offset the broader cost of the child welfare system. It's being treated like an additional revenue stream when it's not a revenue stream. It is resources for these young people. It belongs with these young people. 1512 is being called one of the most impactful child welfare bills across the country because if California can make this change, it'll have a ripple effect all across the nation. Right? There's over $5 million a year that belongs to children who lost their parents, whose parents passed away, paid into Social Security, and the money should now go to the children in the form of survivor benefits. The county, even of Los Angeles, is applying for those benefits for these young people and then pocketing it. It belongs in a bank account set aside, a trust for these young people. I do want to give credit to Supervisor Hilda Solis for her leadership at the county to help change this practice. And I want to give credit to the entire Board of Supervisors because the County of Los Angeles has recognized this is a problem and they are sponsoring this state legislation along with San Diego.
This is a topic that I know is very personal for you. You were in the foster care system as a child and you were adopted by your second foster family. You come from a family of 15 now and have 8 adopted siblings. Can you share a bit about your childhood?
Yeah, so my mother was 16 when she got pregnant with me. She survived an attack and she chose to exercise all of her options of choice in giving me up at birth. I went to a foster home immediately and then a second foster home not that long after. And in my second foster home, the Bryan family, I was adopted. The Bryans were foster parents for 26 years, all throughout my childhood. And I was the 4th adopted child. They adopted 9 of us total. And so I have seen the ins and outs of the system as a foster family, as a former foster child, as an adopted child. And I also recognize that's an experience that less than a handful of legislators in California's history have. And so there's a tremendous responsibility to work on these issues. And I also know there's a tremendous need. The child welfare system in LA County alone is larger than over 40 states. We've got a lot of work to do, but I'm hopeful we can do it all.
A 2020 study in California found that a quarter of former foster youth were sleeping in shelters or temporarily unhoused after exiting foster care. What can California do to make sure this doesn't continue to happen?
Yeah, I think first thing we can do is we can send 1512, AB 1512, to the governor's desk and have him sign it. Because when you set aside these economic resources, you give youth a foundation to build their own economic opportunity and stability from and keep a roof over their head, pursue their education dreams and opportunities. We also have to remember that the challenges foster youth face intersectionally impact the challenges that we all face, and especially those who are living at the margins. We've got to talk about housing. We've got to talk about economic justice. We've got to talk about how wages are not growing at the same rate that wealth is growing on the side. And so
the issues branch off into so many other areas.
It touches all of us,
Yeah.
and especially
Yeah.
our youth.
Assemblyman Bryan, thank you so much for coming into the studio and talking to me about this really important issue that I know is near and dear to your heart.
Thank you for having me.
Still ahead, how new laws could help victims of human trafficking in California. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back to In Focus SoCal. California is one of the largest sites of human trafficking, including children in the country, according to the National Human Trafficking Hotline. Los Angeles, San Diego, and San Francisco are among the top cities. But one state legislator has been working on several new bills to combat sex trafficking and to aid victims. Joining me now is State Senator Susan Rubio, who represents the 22nd District. Senator, it's so good to see you again.
Hello, Tanya. Thank you for having me here.
So you have a few bills surrounding sex trafficking that you've been working on this year. Let's start with SB 545, also known as the Safe Children Act. How would this bill help children who have experienced sex trafficking?
Well, first of all, let me start by saying how much work I've done on behalf of victims. I'm a self-proclaimed victims advocate, and I think it's important that we always ensure that victims are treated fairly and that we're taking care of them. So 545, what it will do, it will prevent children who have been sex trafficked or mistreated as children from being tried in adult court. I think that the system has already failed them once. The reason they end up in jail and for murder is because they're either being abused or harmed by an adult that was supposed to protect them. So this bill will prevent a child that has attacked or murdered their abuser from being tried in adult court. It reroutes their sentence to ensure that they get treatment and counseling and everything that they deserve.
The aftermath after that kind of trauma is so important to make sure that they're getting that kind of support. So that bill will be really crucial. You also have SB 376, which would grant survivors the right to have a human trafficking advocate and a support person at any interview by law enforcement authorities, prosecutors, or defense attorneys. Why is this critical?
Well, all of my bills go hand in hand. So as we go back to 545, that I just shared with you, we're dealing with children. And so I just want to highlight what we're talking about here. We're talking about minors who really don't know how the system works. They are already in a system where they are trapped. They don't have help. They don't have adults that are looking out for them. And so when they're caught and they're brought to any public safety official, they don't know what to say. They don't know what to do, and they're feeling intimidated. So my bill will give them the right to an advocate. That means someone that understands the system, someone that can guide the conversation and protect them from incriminating themselves because they don't know what to say or how to say it. And so we need an adult president that has experience navigating such a complex system to be looking out for these children.
And Senator, what other bills are in the works right now surrounding sex trafficking?
Another one that I think it's critically important is my SB 14, which I've co-authored with my colleague, Senator Shannon Grove. And this is a little sensitive, but right now in the state of California, sex trafficking a minor is not considered a serious offense. So I'm trying to ensure that when a child becomes a victim of sex trafficking, that the adults are held accountable. So this will now redefine that offense as a serious offense in the state of California.
And is there some action or support that communities can start providing more of for the victims of sex trafficking, whether it's reporting things that they might see on the street or if there's a neighbor that they're concerned about?
You know, there's a lot that we all can do, a lot that we can all do to help these children and adults. What happens sometimes, we tend to see things and we don't stop to inquire. I personally had not seen as much sex trafficking until I started doing this type of work. And then you get into the weeds and you start going to communities and talking to police and community organizations. And then you find that there are some, sex trafficking activities going on in your backyard, which is really shocking to me in terms of the communities that I represent. And so I think that all of us could be a lot more vigilant. I think if you see something that doesn't seem right, stop to ask, stop to inquire, and or call the police to ensure that they're investigating. We've heard a lot of cases of children that go missing for years, and then when they're found, the neighbors always say that they saw something strange, they figured something wasn't quite right. But we tend to just keep those thoughts to ourselves. And it's important that all of us are looking out and making sure that we're pushing forward in terms of providing services and speaking up when we see something inappropriate.
Senator Rubio, thanks so much for joining me today on In Focus SoCal and talking about these really important issues.
Thank you so much.
That's it for this edition of In Focus SoCal. You can reach us at infocussocal@charter.com, and of course, you can send me a message on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.